All right. So, one of the things about this whole coronavirus situation is, as you know, I've been talking about grief a lot here. There are some very specific things to coronavirus. There are very specific forms of grief that we are going to be experiencing as a result of this, in ways that we can't express it that are unique to this particular situation. So, let me talk a little bit about this. I've got a few notes here on it. Just say that. So, one of the big things about dealing with the COVID-19 grief is the fact that there is just this loss of normalcy. There's the fact that nothing quite seems like it's going to be like it once was. And there are certain things that we're missing. Now, the first thing to remember, and this is the thing to remember, we don't know when, but this will pass. Stay strong, stay safe, stay alive. You will make it through this. Now, that said, get some help. And I mean, any kind of help you think you need. I'm not necessarily saying professional help, but if that is what you need, go get it. Now, there's other kinds of helps that are out there. Watch videos like this, whatever you can find. Talk to people, however you can. That is absolutely one of the best things that you can do. We are missing so many things as a result of all of this. Now, for example, events, things like that. But let's talk about the grieving situation in particular. So say for example, it's a time where someone you know has, someone you love, is sick with or has passed away from COVID-19. Let's start with a type of grief that is going to happen perhaps more than it would happen with other illnesses, but that is anticipatory grief. And this is one which I personally experienced. My mother had a long illness with cancer before she died. But anticipatory grief is where you know that it's going to happen. You know that it's going to be a thing. And perhaps it's that for some people, it helps them deal with it, process it for later. They did a survey some time ago where they surveyed a number of widows, and about 4 out of 10 widows actually said that they felt less grief after that person had passed than before it happened. And this happens a lot because there is so much grieving that can happen ahead of time, especially if you're losing a spouse, someone who is so integral to your way of life. That you are mourning, amongst other things, also your own loss of normalcy, your own loss of your way of life. However, for many, this is not the case. It does not actually shorten the grief. It's, in a way, to use another term, it's borrowing trouble. It's finding grief before it comes and finds you. And I think that this is something that we have to watch out for. Make certain that the grieving that you're doing is something ahead of time that is something that is helping you. If not, don't let it be that for you. If you start grieving too early, you're not going to be heading any of it off. You're just going to be prolonging the whole cycle. I think for me, I had already grieved the loss of my father, and I think I had a lot of anticipatory grief for the loss of my mother because those two came so quickly on the heels of each other. But regardless, it's one of those things where it's just rough to have to deal with so much of it before it even happens. Now, there are some very good things about this. There can be. One is that you have at least some chance to try and resolve some of these issues. It's hard in the case of COVID, where you don't know how sick somebody's going to be until they go on the respirator, and you don't want to say, hey, look, in case you die, let's deal with all the stuff that we got to deal with. But you don't have to put it that way. Just sit down and say, hey, while we've got this time here, let's talk. And you can have a chance to resolve some of the things that have not been resolved yet. Maybe they'll work out, maybe they won't. The thing is that you can take advantage of that time. You can try to take advantage of that time. And one of the most important things to do is remember that even if that time is not, well, even if you don't get the resolution that you want from spending that time, you took the time. You made the effort. You made it so that it was something that you showed that this was something that was important enough to you that you would make it happen. So that's an important thing there. And so anticipatory grief is one of the different kinds of grief that we can experience as a part of all of this, particular to COVID. Now, there is a certain amount of, there's sort of the opposite of that, where you've got the anticipatory grief, but then you've got another kind of grief called delayed grief. Now, delayed grief is the kind of thing that's going to happen quite often when you've got somebody who needs to be strong. The strong person in the family, who isn't, doesn't really seem to be affecting them. They seem to be doing all right. But, if you've been that strong, you know that it's kind of a sham. That, yeah, you seem to be strong, and yeah, you're coping. But there's a certain amount of grieving that you're just not really doing. And it's something that's going to come back later. It's a chicken that's going to roost. And this is delayed grief. Delayed grief has a few different problems with it. One of the biggest ones is the fact that it comes out in ways that you don't know. It's for lack of a better way of putting it, it's kind of a sublimated grief. It's one where you have had that grief, but then you just don't know. You don't know how to express it. It's hard to find the root cause. You could be. You could be mourning the loss of a friend, and suddenly it just strikes you so hard. And it's not the friend that you're mourning. It is partially. But suddenly, it's the sister that you lost, so many years ago that you weren't allowed to mourn the right way. And it can become kind of confusing that way. But the thing is remember that it's not a good thing. It's not a bad thing. Delayed grief is simply what delayed grief is. And that as a result, well, just be prepared that it might be something that hits you later. Now, on the other hand, you can do something. If you see that this is something, you see a person who is not allowing themselves, a loved one who doesn't allow themselves to experience the grief, then you can do something. You can, maybe give them a moment and say, you don't have to be strong right now. Come, we'll talk. Now, then, another type of grief that is going to be occurring here is disenfranchised grief. And this is going to be happening in a couple of different ways. So, one is that it's sort of the black sheep of the family. Somebody dies and nobody tells you what happened. Everybody is just like, oh, well, we really ought to tell them, but we don't really want to deal with them. And so, you find out about it, they tell you about it, but, and you show up, you're there, you're for the funeral, whatever it may be. But nobody really will talk to you about their experiences, what's going on, how to deal with any of it. You have a family or you have friends or whoever it was that, you shared a common link with this person with, and now they're not there for you. So this is disenfranchised grief. This is the one where Somebody might decide that you're mourning the wrong way, or you're. And the thing about disenfranchised grief, it shares a lot with delayed grief, in that it has so many of these things that just come back later. You don't understand why it's happening when it happens. You don't understand how suddenly you're sad when you thought you were going to be happy. And so that's the thing. Remember to watch out for that as well. Keep an eye out for loved ones who aren't necessarily being strong, but just seem to be okay being on the fringes, being on the outside, and maybe they're afraid of being a burden. Now, one thing that is going to happen with all of this that we do need to talk about is denial. Now, denial is a real problem right now. Denial of all sorts of things. Denial that this is going on. Denial of how to stop it from happening. Denial of, personal responsibility. And I think that if you've been doing a lot of that and someone dies near you, there's a lot of denial that you may be experiencing. Now, this is the thing about denial. It's like all those others. It doesn't help. It only makes it so that you you've got something else later that you got to fix even worse. If you deny what's going on and you don't experience your grief, then you will reach a point where it just becomes crushing and overwhelming. And remember this, denial, not just a river in Egypt, right? Now, there's one other thing about all of this that does need to be brought up here. And it's one of those things, it's a good thing, it's a bad thing. But let's talk about what COVID-19 really is when it comes to this kind of grief. And that is that it's a grief that we're all feeling. It is a collective grief. That has some good things, you can talk to me, I can talk to you. There's a lot of people that are sharing that feeling that we have when we're all going through it. But I think that that's just one of the small things. Well, we'll talk more about how that can be a good thing here in a minute, but let's not forget that collective grief means that something major has happened, something hugely traumatic. For example, other times that we experience collective grief, when there's war, when there's an assassination, when there's an act of terrorism, a natural disaster, things like hate crimes for certain communities, for many communities, mass shootings, all of these cause a set of collective grief. Now, the thing is that just because you're not alone doesn't mean that it's easy to understand. It's really easy, I'm sure you can see on the internet where people are saying the same things over and over again. It's going to get better. This too shall pass. I'm saying that, aren't I? I'm saying that. That's what I started off by saying. But we can't forget that that is true. We will make it through this. Do not despair. But, oh my God, if that's all you're saying, yeah, it's not the most helpful thing in the world. We need to spend some time trying to understand this. Trying to understand COVID, trying to understand how we're coping with it. It's what part of this is trying to understand our grief, trying to understand how we're going through it. So, you can talk. When time comes and I've got the live streams going, you can talk, call in, I'll listen. Even if no one else will. We have this shared sense of sadness, this sense of disbelief, perhaps. It's hard to even comprehend. I mean, I feel like I'm saying, or at times screaming, the numbers into this microphone to people in the world and just going, why don't you understand what is going on here? And it's just... It's hard to believe that they don't believe. But then you understand it's so long. We've been doing this for so long that it's so much easier to just come up with a reason why, you know what, it's probably gonna be fine, and go back to your life. But here's the problem. It's not just gonna be fine. It might be just fine for you, but there's a lot for whom it won't be. And you might be the one responsible for stopping that, for making that happen. So you can be responsible for stopping it. Now, the upshot of this, as I said, though, of the collective grief part, is that you're not alone. You understand what you're feeling is real. You're not the only one. It's valid. It's happening. This is a thing. And for you to feel this way is exactly what you should be doing. We also have the chance to grieve together, even now. Now, we do a lot of things to grieve together. There's a ritual, there's tradition. We can light candles. I'll do that here in a little bit. No, next video probably. We can hold memorial services. I would like to hold a bit of a memorial service here online for some people. We can fly flags at half-mast. We can do whatever it is that we think we need to do to show our sense of collective grief. So there are a lot of different types of grief that we can be experiencing during COVID. Understanding what they are, understanding that you're not the only one, going, oh, that's the kind of thing that I've been feeling. Well, it gives you a little bit more power to understand maybe how to get through this. So, one of the big things, and this is something which has been said over and over again, but I think is really important, and that is that really one of the best things you can do is you can make your grief work. You can make it so that you are taking this energy, you're taking this sadness, this pent-up, collected problem that you have, and you can turn it, oh, that was a spider, and you can turn it into something that is better. You can take that energy and make it into for me, I'm making it into this. Not doing much. I got a little background here, I got a little vid cam here, got a little microphone here, got the laptop. And I don't know everything that I'm talking about here, but I'm speaking from my heart. I'm here, once the live streams are going, I'm here to listen from my heart. Now, let's talk a little bit more about some of the problems, because you might be having some of those different kinds of grief that are coming from COVID. These are exacerbated by a lot of things that are going on here. One is that enforced distance. When someone starts to get really sick with COVID, we put them on a ventilator. We take away their ability to talk. We take away their ability to communicate. Then we shut them away from people. We shut them away from their loved ones. It must be terrifying for the people who are sick, whether they make it through or whether they even don't. But it's also bad for the rest of us, for those of us who are trying to communicate, trying to help, trying to make it better. One of the things that we are able to do under normal circumstances is be present. Be there. Be a witness for something that is so momentous. And here, well, there's a few things we can do. We can do a video call, but there's not a whole lot. So understand that one of the things we do here is we make our own meaning. We understand that that distance is something that has to exist because the person that we love might get better. We want them to get better. Even when that doesn't happen, we have to do it so that, well, I mean, honestly, other people don't get any worse. We have to take care of ourselves. We have to take care of the people around us. And we have to try our very best for that person who may be dying. So we do all of that. And once we've done that, once we've done our very best, even if we can't see them, you have to forgive yourself. You have to know that you did your very best. It's okay. I remember the times when people that I've loved who have died. When there's part of me that just is so certain that if I could have just held them in that moment, held them tighter, I could have just held them to this earth. But of course, I've also been there in that moment, and that's not true. As much as it would be nice that it were, you can't. So, you try. And you know that you have tried your hardest. And this is a cure for another thing. There's always that uncertainty. Even without COVID, there's always that uncertainty. To this day, I think about when my father died, and I gave him CPR. And I think, did I do it right? Could I have done better? Well, I mean, I know the doctor, and I know that from the type of heart attack that he was having, CPR would not have helped, really. But I'm still thinking that many, many years later, aren't I? Still wondering. Uncertainty is a thing, and you just have to let that one be. And in the end, you've got to say, okay, I may not have known how to do CPR correctly, but I tried my hardest. One of the things about all of this, one of the things about the grieving process is understanding that this too shall pass, that you will make it through, that things will be all right, you'll be fine. Life won't return to the way that it was, but it will find something that, something that you recognize, something where you can do some of the things that you used to do. But that's harder to see when COVID's going on. It's harder to see that life will return to normal, that you will get used to being without that person, because now you don't just have to get used to being without that person. My God, when is the world going to go back to normal? There's so much there. So, do not just let that uncertainty, do not just let that ability to see only a few feet in front of you be all you have. Try and look a little bit further. There is a lot further to go before we're on the other side of this. So, and in the end, I'm saying, I guess just know that even if you're not the only one who's having trouble seeing to the other side of grief. Work through it, talk about it. Now, one of the things that's important here is to try and build during this time, and this is part of this, and seeing through to the other side of that grief, and seeing through to the other side of COVID, or at least seeing through to something better for now, is putting together a support network of your own. Some of this can be what we're doing here. Some of it can be going on your favorite social media site, hopefully one that isn't too toxic. For it could be finding a group of people that you're playing, the games with, and you've got, you know, you've got some people who are actually really good to you in that group. You've got yourself a decent crew. Wherever it's coming from, build that. Make it stronger. Lean into those relationships. Now, one of the most important things is that there is so much, for lack of a better way of putting it, not factual thinking. It's not real. And this not factual thinking is something that if you're engaging in it, or you're likely to engage in it, even before someone you know dies, then you need to really look at it really carefully afterwards, because this is the kind of thing where you can very easily find ways to feel bad, to harm yourself, to hurt your feelings when you don't need to. One of the ones right here that I'm thinking of is that the part about, did you do everything you could? Well, yes. Or maybe another way to look at it is that, did you do all the things you really could do that were an intelligent thing to do? For example, I mean, there's a lot of sort of grasping at straws that happens. It's really easy to be like, oh, well, I mean, maybe if we had used this weird treatment, maybe it might be, something that you see in advertisement on. Maybe it's the silver that Jim Baker is pushing, or maybe it's it's an herbal treatment, or maybe chloroquine, or whatever it is, hydroxychloroquine, and maybe it's one of those. But you know what? Take a look. Look at the facts. Find comfort in those facts. Know that none of that would have helped. That it's very likely that by trusting the doctors, you did the very best for your loved one you could. It's really easy to engage in a lot of counterfactual thinking to, like I say, if I could have just held on to them, I could have kept them there, kept them part of my life forever. So, one other thing about all this is, don't try and do this all at once. I've been actually kind of diving pretty deep into this, and there's days where I can't really do a whole lot of it. There is so much to deal with that there's times when we just do not have the energy for other people. We want to. We want to be compassionate. But sometimes we've just got to spend a little bit of time taking care of ourselves. Not forever, not at the expense of others. But don't forget to take care of yourself. So, let's talk a little bit about some strategies. Some things that you might be able to do. So, number one, as you're going through this, as you're listening to this, and you're going, oh, well, I'm doing some of that, and I'm doing some of this, and I'm doing some of this. Accept your feelings without any judgment. This is a new situation. This is one that we do not have a roadmap for. That's fine, okay? Just don't judge yourself. Try and do your best. Another important thing is to identify your grief triggers, the things that can cause you to sort of start to experience it in a way where it's just not being healthy, where you're kind of, it's spinning around in your head over and over again. So a few things: you can identify the things that set you off. You can identify also things in the past that are being brought back to the surface as a result of all of this. This is, again, for some people, it could be an example of delayed or disenfranchised grief, where there's someone else that they need to mourn in the process of mourning the person who they've just lost. There's also, you need to be able to identify your grief reactions, your trauma reactions. I know that for me, I'm not necessarily reacting with anxiety. I'm reacting with anger. I often transform my sadness into anger, but I don't even know if I'm feeling sad half the time right now. I'm just, oh no, I'm sad. But I'm so often angry. There is so many things. I mean, right now I see a person without a mask in a place where, sure, people, it's Florida. People don't wear masks lots of places. But, if you're in a place where you're supposed to wear them and you're just like, I don't have to, it's making me pretty mad. Identify yours. You've probably got some of those too. It may not make you mad, might make you sad. There's all sorts of things like this that are going on. But take a look at your triggers. Try and understand where they are, and try and understand how to, for lack of a better way of putting it, how to make it so that their impact is not so hard. So that, if we're talking about a trigger and a gun and all that kind of same thing, when that hammer comes down on the gun, make it so that it's got a little bit of padding on it. It's not so bad. Maybe we won't be so explosive. As you're doing that, though, as you're identifying those behaviors, don't just, be like, oh, well, this is a thing that I do and I need to stop doing it. You need to see what the meaning is behind that. A lot of this, again, is identifying the specific issues that you're dealing with, specifically what's causing all of this. Now, if you don't know, okay, so if you have this reaction, and I do too, if you have this reaction where, okay, so you're walking around the store and your mask falls off, or the earpiece slips, and or you answer, you're expecting a package and you answer the door and you don't think about it, and I wasn't wearing a mask, and that guy was right there when I signed for the package. Okay, sure, it's a little bit stressful. But that is catastrophic thinking. That is assuming that one small thing is going to lead to the worst possible outcome. Remember, it isn't necessarily any one contact that is going to make you sick. It isn't avoiding any one contact which is going to keep you well. It is having a pattern of being responsible that will help you stay well. You miss it once, it really is not a catastrophe. And this is the thing. Used fact-based reasoning to reduce that catastrophic thinking. Think to yourself, okay, seriously though, what are the chances, what are the realistic chances, honestly, that delivery guy had COVID-19? Pretty low, okay? Because, it's only a certain number of statistical cases, all right? Certain percentage has it. Not very big. And at any one point in time, people who are out there who have it, who do not know that they have it, is a number, but it is not that high of a number. So those chances are pretty low. So that's one. Number two, what are the chances that you caught it from contact surface spread? Well, at first we thought that happened a lot. Now it turns out it doesn't seem to be as much as we thought it was. So not so much. Did the person sneeze in your face? Were there little bits of what they call the fomates and that kind of thing? Well, if not, then relax. There's only so much you can do now. You're doing your best for the most part. Something happened. But, it's not going to help to freak out about it. If you think you need to go get a COVID test, go get one. Maybe you can get one that'll have rapid results. If you can, I definitely recommend that versus the other ones. Regardless of veracity, it's still better than waiting for a period of time that is not particularly helpful. But remember, the facts are this. You're not likely to catch it. One little slip, one little problem, you're going to be fine. There are, of course, many other things that, can cause us to have catastrophic thinking. That's just one example. But anytime your brain goes to, oh my God, the worst thing is going to happen, think about it realistically for a second. Take comfort in the actual facts of the matter. Now, another thing you can do to help you cope with coronavirus grief is inventory your resources and maybe find new ones. When I say inventory your resources, I mean mostly your coping, your support network. So, of course, it depends. Some of us have family members that are part of our support network. Some of us have, friends. Some of us have a very limited support network. Some of us have, just the people we're playing games with. If you have a small support network, work on building it. Even if it is just finding people online that you can talk to. Now, if you can, and you have the money and the means, there are a number of, you can look up Covid-19 support group, online support group, and there are a lot of places that for a relatively inexpensive cost, you can have group support, and you'll kind of get together, and, some of them are Zoom meetings and that kind of thing. Lots of different ways of doing that. Now, another thing that's important in all of this, and this kind of goes back to, the whole thing of using fact-based reasoning, not going down that sort of whole uncertainty rabbit hole. Could I have done this? Could I have done that? Could I have done this? And here I'm going to reference the alcoholics and the serenity prayer. I believe it goes, God, give me the strength to change the things I can, the courage to accept the things I can't, and the wisdom to know the difference. And that is an important thing. Change. Fix the things you can. But there's not a lot here in this we can. So mostly, if you're trying to fix those things, look inside. You need to accept the things that you cannot change. It's hard. But if you can accept them, for what they are, not the worst thing that they could be, well, that's a step. That's a step forward. Another thing you have to remember is that, as I say, we're not perfect. We don't have all of the energy in the world. We can't do this all of the time. A few people I know refer to this as spoons. I don't have enough spoons to do it. And if you don't have enough energy, if you don't have enough spoons to do it, then what you have to remember is you tried your best. Forgive yourself for all of the rest. I guess I want to leave this with one last thought. Think about how you would deal with somebody who is going through the things you're going through. What would you say to them? Not all of them would be the right thing to say, no. But you'd be trying, right? You try your best. And that person that you're talking to, they may not accept it. They may not come through in the way that you want it to. But you don't get mad at them for it happening that way. So here's what you do. You're compassionate, right? You find out a way to keep loving them, to keep trying to make it better for them. And that's what you're supposed to do. That's the important part. But here's the trick. Don't just do it with them. Be just as compassionate as yourself as you are with others.